Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or for more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to Farm Factor as Tom talks about the ups and downs of the cattle market over the last couple of months.
Duane Toews joining you once again here at the Wichita Farm and Ranch Expo. During the market shootout, 4 analysts from KFRM had the opportunity to talk with growers and producers here in the Central Plains. We pulled them aside, talk specifically about one commodity. Tom, I'm not sure how we ended up with the short straw, but you got to talk about cattle and talk about a market in the last couple of months here that's taken a beating. The cattle market certainly has had its downs and its even worse downs.
That's even putting it mildly. We have seen a cattle market that has went from just a year ago having record highs, be it the cash market, be it the live cattle, feeder cattle futures market, even box beef prices. Then you look at where we are now, we have seen quite a pullback, and it's a situation where producers are having a hard time actually understanding what's happened to them. The worst thing is, last year when we had those record high prices, we was seeing producers selling the board, buying put options, and then very unhappy because they was making margin calls and they've seen their puts expire worthless. This year they decided we're not going to make that mistake again. A lot of producers went naked this year, and they're paying the price as we continue to see this market collapse to the downside, technically and fundamentally.
We've heard anecdotal reports of $500, $600, even $700 losses on some of these fed cattle that came out this fall. It doesn't take long to burn up a lot of equity and kind of test your mettle if you want to jump back in with another pin.
That's exactly right, Duane. And what we're going to see is we're going to see some old faces disappear feeding cattle. We're going to see some new faces appear like we've seen quite often in cattle cycles, because just what you said, we're seeing big losses out there in the equity. We're seeing banks starting to back off on trying to finance cattle. We're seeing some feed yards that are suffering a little bit too, because when prices get lower, we start to see the feed yards starting to partner more with customers to get them to come in, then they're sharing in large losses too. And now this whole cattle situation, even when things were great, the people that was struggling the most was the people that was finishing cattle. Cow-calf producer done great, stockers done great, the feeders out there done great. It was the feed yard that has suffered the most. They did have small periods of great gains, but overall they was losing money more times than not.
Obviously, we talk a lot of times about the highs too high, the lows too low. That may be a case again this time around.
That's a very good ideal there, because last year's highs were extremely too high. They got a lot of help from speculators, managed money pushing them up. But now we're seeing these lows where I would agree they're too low, but that's what happens. We have a tendency to push things too far. One thing you might want to think about, if you're buying cattle down the road, think about purchasing call options or buying the board as a way to protect yourself if markets do go higher and you're paying more for those cash cattle down the road.
Final thoughts about the cattle market, Tom?
Everything comes back. Keep in mind, when we're down on the lows, people start to think there's no way it's going to come back. You might remember that most of the bad news comes out in the bottom of the market. Most of the good news comes out in the top of the market. About the time you give up on it's when it turns around. So stay optimistic. Things will change. Just give it time. Be patient. And when you do have a chance to lock in break-evens or lock in profits, take advantage of it. Don't pass it up.
Tom Leffler, Leffler Commodities, one of the market analysts that joined us at the Market Shootout IX at the Wichita Farm and Ranch Show. Jamie, back to you.
Thanks again for joining us for the Market Shootout IX at the Wichita Farm and Ranch Expo. I'm your host, Jamie Bloom, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. See you next week on Farm Factor. We're here every Tuesday on Ag AM in Kansas.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.